Hey folks, Mr. Tolly. I'm doing a little restoration work today and thought I'd bring you along for the ride. It's nothing too terrible. This is a fairly easy repair, but you know, a lot of people when they're collectors of rare firearms or the more rare firearms, they want to keep the repair work needs to be as authentic as possible. This one happens to be a holster for a German Luger. This style of holster was also used for, I believe, the P-38, and it was used for several different firearms from the era. It was used, gosh, I believe it was the same holster was used for World War I, World War II. And it's a molded holster. I can't remember exactly if it was wet molded or steam or how it was molded. I can't remember exactly. Some of this stuff, I have documentation for all of this kind of stuff, so I know I can keep as authentic as possible when I do the restorations. They're done, all the stitching is done with a linen thread, as opposed to the nylon threads that I use now, which, you know, they're just the way it is. And you get a linen thread. I keep it in a little baggie, and I do that so that the color doesn't get affected, and it gets stored in a little plastic container and kept out of the light and all kinds of stuff. So it's a cotton linen thread, and that's what these generally use. So this one happens to be very well packaged. I've done work for this gentleman before. This is another holster. He always packs very well. Anytime a holster gets shipped to me, I always ask that they insure it. I always insure it for return postage. To replace a holster like this, a vintage holster, you can buy new ones, new replica holsters. And they're exactly that. They're replicas. They're pretty cheap. But to have an authentic holster, and I'll show you when I unwrap this from the extra bubble wrap here. I've worked on some of them dating, I think the oldest one I worked on was like a 1917. Just slide this out the top. This one is a 1936. And I don't know how well the markings will show up, but it is dated. And I know my lighting kind of sucks out here. So, well, you know what, I'll get you down on the counter here and see, you can probably see it a little better that way. Alrighty, I don't get to see my viewfinder real well, but we have markings here. We have, oh, I don't speak German, so I don't know all the markings anymore. I can't memorize all of them, but the date, the year is marked right here, 1936. So this one is fairly simple. It's actually in pretty good shape. I've seen some that, let me zoom you back out now. I've seen some that have been in pretty rough shape. The majority of them, this strap is gone. I've had to replace the strap, and it can be difficult to replace them. You can't duplicate the wear. It's just impossible to do. The stitching can be hard to duplicate. This one in particular, there is a takedown tool that goes in. Some people think it's for the coup de grace round, where you keep a spare round in there, which a spare round fits in there, but that's not what it's for. It is for a takedown tool for the Luger. So it's just it's a real little tool that goes in there. But this one came off, and yes, a spare 9mm round does fit in there, but it's a small takedown tool that helped take the pistol down. So I'm going to have to go around, take all the stitching off, and when you look at the stitching, you can see that it is taken on some of the dye from the leather so you can see the color difference. The hardware is generally brass, and you can see it's tarnished a little there. We don't want to take any of that tarnish away. We don't want to take, we want to, I usually will not do anything to them unless they're in bad shape. If they're in really rough shape, I'll do some treatment to the leather. Otherwise, I let the owners do it because they know what they like to use on them. So this one could use a little conditioning. That's about all it needs. It's actually not in bad shape. So just a little conditioning is all it needs. I always give them a good looking over. Make sure all the other stitching is in good shape. I believe the last one I did for this customer had all the stitching on the top flap was gone, and the flap was detached. So I restitched his top flap, and this one is missing a few stitches there, but they're not affecting the attachment. They're stitches that go beyond where it would attach, so they're not really affecting anything. And they always seem on this one belt loop, I don't know why they do it, but they go over about 5 or 6 stitches past. But every holster is like that. Now I've seen them where they've replaced this belt loop and they've attached it over here instead of here. I don't know. Some of the other ones, these loops will have lines in them. So you got to watch all that kind of stuff. And I think that was after. I can't exactly remember anymore. I got to look at my books. That they put the line in it. It was in the, I want to say it was in the 40s. The very, very early 40s, late 30s. I'm going to have to pull some threads out here. And we have to do that carefully. Just because we don't want to wreck anything. Some of these go behind the flap. And you don't want to, if you're not careful with it, you could wind up wrecking a thread behind the flap there. You wreck one of them that's holding the flap on, you don't want to do that. There we go. A little stuck under there, but they weren't too bad. So it attaches on the inside here, but the stitching is seen on the outside. So you want to be careful. You can see that the color of the thread is not going to match. I'll try to match it to, like a piece here. But since I have some of the original thread, I keep that right here so I see it and I can try to match it. It's not going to be perfect. I'll get it as close as I can. And I'll use some dye, some beeswax and such to kind of, I have to wax the thread anyway, so it'll help me to establish a color for the thread. So I'm going to get after that, pull all these threads out. Most of this is just not going to be much to it. Alright, so I'm ready to get started. Now, a lot of times you can just start at the top and work your way down, which I think is what I can do here. I should but I'm going to, you always want to make sure, because you don't want to get halfway done and then all of a sudden, oops. So I'm just going to take a couple of needles. You can see the impression on here from where this piece was originally set. And now I got it kind of stuck here, so don't use any glue on these. They didn't in the original, when they originally assembled it. I'm not going to use any now. So I've got one hole that goes above where this goes. So this obviously has one hole extra, or one hole that stays above. So I will have that top hole will go through the top hole out here. Even up our thread. And then that second hole will go through all three pieces. At least that's the way everything looks to be. And I know my light is very bright for you, and my head's going to get in the way. Yeah, so I'm just kind of showing you the getting started here, and then I'm going to shut you off because I'll be in the way a lot. I have to see what I'm doing because what I'm doing is more important to me than it is to you. Alright, so I'll probably leave these two needles in here for a little bit just to kind of be there, I guess. But just like any saddle stitch, you want to make sure you're doing everything exactly the same every time. I did too when I before I put these together to go in here. I did use a little neat soda oil on the inside here where this piece is, just to kind of, it's a little spot that's never going to see anybody being able to get at it again. So I thought I'd put a little in there just to kind of treat that little place, because nobody's going to be at it again. So, and I did put a little carnauba cream on this just to kind of give it a little bit of something, because it needs a little something. I can tell that the leather's dry, so it needed a little bit of something in there. I like how these holes are lining up. Just kind of why I wanted to leave those needles in there. And you don't want to pull your threads too tight. That's one thing that you can really screw up on a holster like this, is you got to remember that these holes have been stitched before and they used a lock stitch on them. And this kind of a saddle stitch, I'll show you this when it's done, and you'll hopefully you'll see that it pretty much matches all the rest of the stitching on here. But where was I going now? That train left the station. Might come back. But everything will hopefully match as well as I can get it. And you know, and you always want to make sure you got enough thread, as I say with everything. Better to waste some and not need than run short. But and the linen threads are always a little more difficult. Anyway, I think I was saying, if you pull your threads too tight, the leather being as old as it is, because like I said, this is a 1936 holster. It's ain't no spring chicken no more, they say. So it's what, 84 years old? Am I right there? I don't know. I can't count so good either most times. It's a pretty old holster though. So we want to be careful with it. If you pull your threads too tight, you can pull them right through this leather. And that is not what we want to do. That might make our customer a little cranky. I've had holsters and knife sheaths that, and bayonet scabbards too for that matter, that they're that way. I mean, the leather has been so mistreated and so dried out that they just can't do it. So we kind of get a little limited as to what we can do and how far we can go. So hopefully this all turns out really nice. Like I said, this is a repeat customer, and I love repeat customers. I think it's great because they're putting their trust in me a second time, and I think I like that. I mean, anybody would. So I don't have a lot of those. A lot of people only have, you know, one. They need you once and that's it. So anyway, rather than yammering on here, I'm going to go ahead and flip you off, shut you off, not flip you off. I'm going to turn you off for right now. I'll be back when I get this done, and I'll show you the end result. So far, we're just getting her stitched in here. Alrighty folks, I zoomed you in a little bit so you can see what my work looks like here. You know, and trying to make it match as well as I can to everything else. The thread here is always darker, and you know, it's a dark spot on the holster because it's up against the body, and all the dirt and stuff gets accumulated right here, so it kind of gets darker. I think I did a pretty good job of getting the match. When you look on the back here, it looks pretty good. So I think we're in good shape. The piece is in there, and it looks good. So aside from a little conditioning, the leather seems a bit dry, and it could use some care. But aside from that, this holster's in good shape. I've seen them in a lot worse shape. So I'll see what the customer says if he wants me to go ahead and do some conditioning on it. Usually they like to do their own because everybody's kind of got their own recipe for it. Especially collectors that collect a lot of this kind of stuff. Like I said, this is the second holster that I've done for this customer. So, you know, we'll see what he wants to do. And we'll go from there. So y'all stay safe. God bless. And I'll get back with you in the next one. If I do end up doing some conditioning work on this one, I'll bring you back for that. So we'll catch you in the next video.